This is the story of one of the brightest, most promising young women, a student leader, loved by her entire community, whose life was stolen in the most brutal way imaginable. Kidnapped from her own home, forced to withdraw money, and executed by two ruthless criminals. This case shook an entire nation. It is one of the darkest, most heartbreaking, and unforgettable stories we've ever told. And once you hear it, you will never forget Eve Carson. Eve Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia. From an early age, she was known for her drive and determination. In high school, she excelled not only in academics, but in leadership and service. She served as vice president of the student council, volunteered at a nursing home and a shelter for abused teens, worked as a congressional page, and even assisted in a stem cell research lab, all while still a teenager. After graduating with honors, Eve enrolled at the University of North Carolina, double majoring in political science and biology. Her academic record earned her a prestigious scholarship, and she quickly became one of the most respected students on campus. She held leadership roles in multiple organizations, continued her volunteer work, taught science to elementary school students, and joined service trips abroad. She spent a summer in Ecuador assisting doctors, studied for a semester in Cuba, and joined a research project in Egypt. By her senior year, Eve was widely admired for her achievements and had already secured a job offer at a major company. In March 2008, Eve was 22 years old and in her final semester at UNC. She lived in a house off campus with several close friends. On the night of March 5th, around 1:30 a.m., her roommates left for a party and invited her along. Eve declined, explaining that she had classwork to finish. When her friends returned around 4:30 a.m., something felt wrong. The front door was wide open, the lights inside were on, but Eve and her car were gone. They tried calling her, but she didn't answer. At first, they assumed she had stepped out unexpectedly and would be back soon. By the following day, when there was still no sign of her, one friend went to the police to file a missing persons report. That's when investigators delivered devastating news. Earlier that morning, they had discovered the body of a young woman but had not yet identified her. When police showed a photo, Eve's friend immediately recognized her. It turned out that around 5 a.m., just a short time after Eve vanished, a resident a mile away had been awakened by the sound of gunshots and a chilling scream. Alarmed, she called police. Officers rushed to the area and found the body of a young woman lying in the street. She carried no ID, no phone, nothing that could help confirm who she was. What they did know was that she had been shot multiple times. With Eve's identification confirmed, detectives interviewed her roommates to establish a timeline. At 1:30 a.m., she was at home studying. By 5 a.m., she was dead less than a mile away. The pressing question was how she ended up there, and who was responsible for her murder. Are you ready to dive into some of the most terrifying cases in the world? Don't miss a single detail. Oh, and make sure to subscribe to my channel. Your support gives me the motivation to create even better content in the future. We're just a few subscribers away from reaching our first 500, so help me hit that milestone. Now let's get back to this chilling journey into the world of crime. With Eve's car missing, detectives quickly began to suspect robbery as the motive. Their suspicions grew stronger when they searched her room and discovered that her wallet and credit cards were gone. They hadn't been left near the body either. The medical examiner's report ruled out sexual assault, narrowing the scope of possible motives. Phone records revealed that her last signal had pinged off a tower near a highway outside of town, but the phone itself was never recovered, suggesting the killer had thrown it away. Then came the first real breakthrough. Eve's car was found abandoned only a few miles from her house. Investigators sent it straight to forensics for fingerprint and DNA testing. At the same time, experts analyzing her computer discovered it had been active until 3:30 a.m. That meant Eve was still at home at least 2 hours after her roommates left for the party. Sometime after that, she was forced out of the house and ended up a mile away, where she was killed. News of her murder spread rapidly through Chapel Hill. Eve wasn't just another student. She was one of the most visible leaders on campus. The shock was immediate, and grief quickly gave way to fear. If someone like Eve could be targeted, no one felt safe. Tips poured in by the dozens, but none brought detectives closer to answers. Then investigators made a critical discovery. Since Eve's cards were missing, they pulled her transaction history. What they found was damning. Just 18 minutes after she last used her computer, $700 was withdrawn in 2 separate transactions. A third attempt to take out more cash was denied when the card hit its daily limit. The withdrawals were traced to an ATM across town. Detectives obtained the security footage and confirmed a match. There was Eve's car, parked at the machine. A man was visible in the driver's seat using her card. In the blurry video, a figure appeared to be sitting in the back seat as well. Investigators feared it might be Eve herself, but the footage was too grainy to confirm. Forensic specialists tried enhancing the video, but the image never improved. Police soon learned the same suspect had attempted to use Eve's card at several other ATMs across the city, but none of those machines had cameras. Then, on March 7th, 2 days after her death, another alert came in. Around 12:30 a.m., someone had tried to use Eve's card again, this time at an ATM inside a 24-hour convenience store in a nearby town. Officers rushed to the scene, and this time they caught a break. The machine had working surveillance. When they pulled the footage, detectives saw the suspect clearly. But there was a twist. The man on this video wasn't the same person seen in the first ATM footage. With 2 different men caught on surveillance, investigators had to confront a troubling possibility. More than one person might have been involved in Eve's murder. If not, perhaps the killer had passed her card to someone else. Either way, they needed an identity. Unfortunately, the grainy footage wasn't enough to get a clear match, so detectives went public. They released the images to the media, hoping that someone in the community would recognize the men. The case had already gripped the city, and the tip line was flooded with calls. But once again, every lead came up short. That changed on March 12th. An anonymous caller phoned in, claiming he knew the man in the convenience store footage. His name, the caller said, was Demario Atwater. Police quickly dug into Atwater's background, and what they uncovered was alarming. Just 21 years old, he already had a lengthy record: robberies, assaults, drug charges, and more. He had been in and out of prison, often released early despite repeated offenses. Investigators also learned that only 2 days after Eve's death, Atwater had been scheduled to appear in court for being caught with a handgun while on probation. Detectives pulled up Atwater's mugshots and compared them to the ATM footage. The match was clear. They were looking at the same man. Adding to the case, Atwater lived only blocks from the convenience store where the attempted withdrawal had been made. When detectives brought him in, Atwater denied any involvement in Eve's murder. But the video evidence was enough to keep him in custody. As investigators pressed further, another name surfaced: 17-year-old Lawrence Levet. Despite his age, Levet already had a criminal history. When detectives pulled his mugshots, they immediately recognized him. He was the man seen driving Eve's car in the first ATM footage. Unlike Atwater, Livett didn't come quietly. When officers arrived at his home, he barricaded himself inside. The standoff escalated until SWAT was called in. Once arrested, Livett too denied any role in the killing. With both suspects in custody but refusing to talk, detectives built their case with evidence. Cell phone data placed them both near Eve's neighborhood on the night she was killed, even though neither lived nearby. Investigators pieced together what they believed happened. Atwater and Livett had been out looking for someone to rob when they spotted Eve alone at home. They forced her to accompany them, driving her to a series of ATMs where she was made to withdraw cash. When they realized they had already hit her daily limit of $700, they drove her to a secluded spot on the edge of town. There, they ended her life. Given the brutality of the crime, prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty for Demario Atwater. For Lawrence Livett, the situation was different. Because he was only 17 at the time of the murder, the maximum penalty he faced was life in prison. Still, prosecutors worried the evidence alone might not guarantee convictions. So they made a calculated move. They offered Atwater a deal. In exchange for pleading guilty, they would take the death penalty off the table. He accepted. Atwater admitted that he and Livett set out that night intending to commit a robbery. According to him, it was Livett's idea to head toward the university campus to look for a victim. As they drove through a neighborhood, they spotted Eve through the window of her home and decided she was the one. Armed with guns, they forced their way inside and made her drive them in her own car. Over the next several hours, they stopped at ATMs across the city, withdrawing as much money as they could. The entire time, Eve begged for her life, promising she would not tell anyone if they let her go. But instead of showing mercy, they planned to kill her because she had seen their faces, despite making no effort to conceal them. Atwater told prosecutors that they drove her to a deserted street and shot her multiple times with 2 different guns. Before they opened fire, he recalled, Eve asked them to pray with her. They refused. In April 2010, 2 years after the crime, Atwater was sentenced. Because of his plea agreement, the judge spared him the death penalty but imposed life in prison plus 30 additional years. In court, Atwater turned to Eve's parents, apologized, and said he deserved whatever punishment he received. Livett, however, refused to plead guilty. His trial began in December 2011. Despite his defense attorney's arguments, Atwater's confession and the physical evidence were overwhelming. The jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. But Livett's case didn't end there. In 2013, the State Court of Appeals overturned his sentence, citing a Supreme Court precedent that ruled life without parole for juveniles was unconstitutional. At his new hearing, Livett spoke directly to the court, insisting that everyone makes mistakes and denying he was the monster people believed him to be. Yet he expressed no real remorse. The judge again sentenced him to life in prison. Investigators also noted that Livett had been a suspect in another eerily similar case. In January 2008, just months before Eve's murder, a 29-year-old student was killed after a break-in. As in Eve's case, money was withdrawn from the victim's account at ATMs across the city. Detectives suspected Livett but lacked enough evidence to charge him, and the case was eventually dropped. Eve's murder made national headlines and sparked change. In the summer of 2008, North Carolina lawmakers passed legislation imposing tougher penalties and stricter procedures for gang-related crimes. The law, which took effect that December, was written in direct response to her case. At UNC, her classmates and professors created a scholarship in her name and built a memorial garden on campus to honor her life. In 2009, one of her close friends, later a finalist on American Idol, spoke about how Eve's death had inspired him to audition. Without her, he said, he never would have found the courage to chase his dream. Share your thoughts on this story in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.